9 Strangest Unsolved Missing Mysteries of Millionaires. It is said that each year around 800,000 people go missing as per the records, around the world. But if the unreported figures are added, it might rise up to a tally of 1,300,000 missing persons per year. But keeping track of every commoner is impossible, in this busy world by people like us, who are engrossed in their hectic life. These people neither make into the breaking news nor do they have journalists swarming around their apartment to get a glimpse of their mourning family members. They are the people who just add up to the tally and become a number in the records. But when the person involved is worth millions of dollars, it complicates the situation significantly. Number 9. Moe Jiwani. Moe Jiwani went missing in May 2006, when he left his mansion for Toronto where he had to do a business and did not return. His family waited 4 days before reporting his disappearance to Halton Regional Police. The Oakville hotelier has not been seen since last April when he was spotted at a Toronto strip club. Jiwani's Mercedes was found in the parking lot with his credit cards, identification and cell phone inside. On further investigation, it was found that Jiwani exhibited all the characteristics of a heavy user of crack cocaine. Although the police examined many accused, they could not get any leading clue, and the disappearance of this millionaire remains a mystery till date. Private investigator Mark Mendelson, who was hired by Jiwani's family, says his investigation has gone nowhere. "It's at a standstill," he said. Almost 3 months after Moe Jiwani disappeared, his wife was fleeced for $80,000 while attempting to pay a ransom for her husband, which turned out to be a hoax perpetrated by acquaintances of his. The money was never recovered, and Jiwani's whereabouts remain a mystery. Number 8. Guma Aguiar. Aguiar was last seen in Fort Lauderdale, Florida at sunset on June 19, 2012. Home surveillance video showed him leaving his private dock on Southeast 10th Street alone aboard his 30-foot Jupiter center console boat, the TT Zion. A neighbor saw the boat speeding and leaving a large wake in the canals. Aguiar passed through Port Everglades in 4- and 5-foot swells, jumping waves and moving quickly. No one was apparently following him. Boating conditions that night were bad with thunderstorms in the area and 20-mile-per-hour winds, and there was a small craft advisory in effect. Aguiar traveled north along the coast of Fort Lauderdale and, about 4 miles offshore, began having trouble steering. The tie rod that enabled his boat's twin outboard engines to work together was broken. According to data retrieved later from the GPS and engines, the TT Zion sped up and slowed down several times while its starboard engine was out of control, and both engines suddenly stopped running at 7:54 p.m. About 6 hours later, the unoccupied boat washed ashore on the beach near the elbow room bar. The navigation lights were on, the keys were in the ignition and the throttle controls were in the forward position, but the engines weren't operating. Aguiar's wallet, cellular phone and some clothes were aboard. A 2-day search by the Coast Guard, covering an area the size of Rhode Island, turned up no sign of Aguiar. If he accidentally fell overboard, his body was probably pulled north by the ocean current while the easterly winds pushed the boat towards the coastline. Aguiar was born in Brazil and moved to Florida as a young child. He and his wife had 4 children. He left behind a $100 million estate. He had made a fortune in oil and gas. He was a practicing Jew with a Jewish mother and a Christian father, and split his time living between the United States and Israel. He was declared legally dead in January 2015 at the request of his wife and mother-in-law. The petition said his death was an accidental drowning. His body has never been found. Number 7. Steve Fossett. Steve Fossett was a businessman who had made his fortune in the stock market. He was also an avid adventurer and sportsman who set no fewer than 116 world records in flying, sailing, and ballooning. He was the first person to fly solo around the world in a hot air balloon, and made the first solo non-stop journey around the world in an airplane. At 63 years old, Fossett disappeared in September 2007 over the Sierra Nevada mountains in California during a solo flight, prompting what was called the largest and most complex search for a single individual in U.S. history. Neither Fossett nor his plane were found, and Fossett was declared legally dead in February 2008. In October of the same year, 13 months after his disappearance, the wreckage of Fossett's plane was discovered by a hiker. DNA tests proved the bones found on site belonged to Steve Fossett. He had collided head-on with a mountainside and died instantly. 60 of his world records were still standing when he disappeared. Number 6. Bob Harrod. Bob Harrod was 81 years old and newly married when he went missing from his home on Carnation Drive, Placentia, California on Monday, July 27, 2009. This multimillionaire had a fairy tale love story, as he managed to marry his sweetheart after a separation of 59 years. This was the time he was eagerly waiting for his newly wedded wife to return, who had gone to her home at Missouri to finish her packing. His son-in-law was the first one to find out that he was missing. He was preparing for the arrival of his new wife, assisted by his son-in-law Jeff Michaels. When Michaels returned from a trip into town to pick up supplies, he found Harrod's housekeeper waiting outside the locked home. His father-in-law was nowhere to be found. Harrod's wallet and keys were gone, but his car was still parked in the driveway. Though elderly and suffering from poor eyesight, Harrod did not have dementia or other medical conditions that would explain erratic behavior. There have been no attempts to access his bank account or credit cards. Though Harrod was a multimillionaire, nothing had been signed over to his new wife and she had not yet been written into his will. There had recently been a heated discussion with his daughters regarding money, as well as concerns about him lending large amounts of money to a friend who was thought to be taking advantage of the elderly man. However, Harrod's friend, daughters, and son-in-law have all been cleared of suspicion. The police are still trying to find out about his whereabouts. Number 5. Kevin McGeever. After being missing for 8 months, an Irish property tycoon was found wandering along a country road looking emaciated and confused. Kevin McGeever, 68, told police that he had been abducted at gunpoint and held in a shipping container. However, his story started to unravel when he was questioned by police. It eventually came out that he had been living in a remote area of the country and had concocted the kidnapping story to escape financial pressures. McGeever's business had collapsed, and he was suspected of running property frauds in Dubai and Germany. He apparently believed that his former clients would be hesitant to demand money from him, as it might have implicated them in his kidnapping. McGeever was arrested for wasting police time and making false allegations. Number 4. Leonid Rozhetskin. This Jewish lawyer was born in Leningrad, Soviet Union and emigrated with his mother to U.S. when he was 14. He was a brilliant student who received a scholarship to the Columbia University from where he graduated with distinction. He returned to Russia at the age of 26, as a lawyer and the owner of a law firm. The owner of assets that can be estimated as several $100 million, suddenly went missing under suspicious circumstances after disappearing from his villa in Germania, Latvia on March 16, 2008. He was last seen on the day of his disappearance at a club called XXL. There are various widely held views about his whereabouts. While the Russians press claim that he is in California under the Federal Witness Protection Program, a preliminary DNA test suggests that a body found in a forest near Germania is that of Rozhetskin. Number 3. Camila Lyman. Camila Lyman was a wealthy heiress. Her parents were old-money Boston aristocrats. She shared her father's passion for show dogs. She was popular in the show dog world. Her father Arthur died in 1968. When her mother died 5 years later, her world seemed to fall apart. Her behavior became more and more bizarre. Starting in the mid-1970s, her sister Mary noticed that the estate was not being taken care of properly. Camila became an eccentric recluse and spent more time with her dogs than she did with people. Her appearance began to change as well. Between 1978 and 1985, she underwent a transformation to being a man, legally changing his name to Cam Lyman. Around 1981, He started to associate with a fellow dog owner named George O'Neill. George was eventually hired by Cam, becoming the caretaker of his estate. He took care of paying Cam's bills and arranged rides to dog shows. Eventually, he became Cam's sole confidant. He associated with no one else but O'Neill. Cam vanished sometime in 1987. His disappearance was discovered when his relatives and friends failed to receive Cam's customary Christmas card. In December of 1988, his family contacted the police and reported Cam missing. They also contacted the law firm in charge of the Lyman Trust. They hired Charles Allen to investigate the disappearance. Allen discovered that O'Neill had been depositing Cam's trust fund checks. He was surprised to find that O'Neill held Cam's power of attorney. He was also Cam's sole beneficiary and stood to inherit his estate. O'Neill was asked about Cam, who was not concerned about the disappearance, claiming that he had done it before. He also claimed that in July of 1987 he and Cam had an argument over the phone about the dogs. The next day, O'Neill went to Cam's house and found the phone ripped out of the wall and the dogs unattended. He never saw Cam again. O'Neill claims he believed that Cam had gone to Europe to undergo a sex change operation, but gave no reason as to why he thought this or why he neglected to inform anybody about Cam's disappearance. Much of Cam's net worth, from bank accounts to family heirlooms, had disappeared. This was between $3 and $5 million. In December of 1994, Cam's family asked the probate court to declare him legally dead. The judge declared him dead in July of 1995. The judge noted that she did not believe O'Neill was credible and was suspicious of him. On September 24, 1997, Cam's remains were found inside the sewer system near her home by Greg Siner, who had bought and lived in the house. He located the remains after noticing a strange smell from the sewer. Coincidentally, investigating were searching other parts of the property at that time. In October of 1998, dental records confirmed that the remains belonged to Cam. The medical examiner concluded that Cam had been murdered, probably around the time he disappeared. Cam's murder remains unsolved. Number 2. Don Lewis. Don Lewis was a self-made millionaire and a somewhat eccentric sort who would wear yard sale clothing while carrying huge amounts of cash. Lewis had made his money in real estate and trucking, as well as a number of other ventures. He and his wife Carol had transformed 140 acres of land in Tampa, Florida into wildlife on Easy Street, a sanctuary for 200 big cats. In August 1997, Carol reported 60-year-old Don missing, and the following day his van was found at an airport with the keys still inside. It came to light that Lewis had filed for a domestic violence injunction against his wife 2 months before his disappearance, alleging that she had threatened to shoot him. Lewis's 3 daughters from his first marriage believe that Carol is responsible, even suggesting that police test the meat grinder at the sanctuary for human DNA. His wife called the rumors ridiculous, saying, "My tigers eat meat, they don't eat people." She believes Lewis absconded to Costa Rica, where he owned property. Number 1. Ambrose Joseph Small. Ambrose Joseph Small was a Canadian theatre magnate, who owned theatres in several Ontario cities including the Grand Opera House in Toronto, the Grand Opera House in Kingston, and the Grand Theatre in London, Ontario. On December 1, 1919, Ambrose Small sold his theatrical holdings, at a profit of $1.7 million Canadian dollar. On December 2, Small met with lawyer Flock in Small's office at the Grand Opera House. Flock left at 5:30 p.m. and was the last person to see Small. That night, Small disappeared from his office. No one who testified for the police claims to have seen him leave his office, or in the Adelaide and Yonge Street area, outside the building. A newsstand operator, Ralph Savain, claimed to have seen Small and had an altercation with him regarding the late shipment of that day's newspapers. At the time, however, this claim was repudiated by the police, who considered it to be an attempt by Savain to gain fame from the case. Small had no motive to disappear. The millionaire did not take money with him, nor was there any ransom note, let alone evidence of kidnapping. At 56 years old, Small owned theaters in 7 Ontario cities and was the controller of 62 other buildings, a self-made millionaire at the height of his career. Because Ambrose Small was known to disappear occasionally to womanize and carouse, his disappearance was not reported nor was it really noticed for several weeks. In January 1920, Small's attorney, Flock, along with Teresa Small, now alarmed by Small's lengthy absence, notified the local police. Teresa Small offered a $50,000 reward for any information about her husband's disappearance and current whereabouts. Small still disappeared and his body was never recovered. Small's case remains unsolved. If you enjoy video, please subscribe my channel. Thanks for watching.